morning. Good morning, Shadow. So nice to hear from you, as always. Page 656, Chapter 4, Several Individual Stories. Oh, we're getting so close to the end. If I'm not mistaken, this is the last chapter. Yep. This is the last chapter, and there's only 2 parts. So today and tomorrow. And this volume will be done. That's volume 2 will be done. I can't wait to get into volume 3. You can see where it's going, kind of, and I'm really excited to get into it. It's been such a long time since I've been through it. The last chapter was so good. You have to read it, especially today. It's a warning. Several individual stories. I have fragmented the fates of all the prisoners I have previously mentioned in this book, subordinating their stories to the plan of the book, to the contours of the archipelago. I've steered away from biographical accounts. It would have been too monotonous. It's how they write and write, shifting all the burden of inquiry off the author's shoulders onto the readers. But precisely because of this, I consider that at this point I have the right to cite several prisoners' stories in their entirety. So, Anna Petrovna Skripnikova, and we've heard of all of these stories, I think, already. I remember Anna's story. The only daughter of an ordinary worker in my cop, Anna Skripnikova, was born in 1896. As we already know from the history of the party, under the cursed Tsarist regime, all paths to an education were closed to her, and she was condemned to the half-starving life of a female slave. And all this really did happen to her. But after the revolution, at the time she was accepted into the Maikop gymnasium. Anna grew up to become a big girl who also had a large head. A girl who was her gymnasium friend made a drawing of her, which consisted solely of circles. Her head was round from all angles. She had a round forehead and round eyes, which somehow expressed eternal perplexity. The lobes of her ears rounded off as they grew into her cheeks, and her shoulders round, and her figure was a sphere. Anna began to think about things too soon in life. As early as the 3rd grade, she asked her teacher's permission to take Lubov and Dostoevsky from the gymnasium library. The teacher was indignant. "It's too soon for you." "All right, if you don't let me read them here, I'll get them in the city library." At the age of 13, she emancipated herself from God and ceased to be a believer. At the age of 15, she pored over the church fathers exclusively for the purpose of furiously refuting the priests in class, to the general satisfaction of her fellow students. However, she herself adopted the steadfastness of the Russian church schismatics as her highest model. She learned, it is better to die than to permit one's spiritual cord to be broken. No one interfered with her receiving the gold medal she deservedly won. In 1917, what a time for study. She went to Moscow and entered Chaplugin's Cheptykin's advanced school for women in the Department of Philosophy and Psychology. As a gold medalist, she was paid till the October coup at State Duma scholarship. This department prepared teachers of logic and psychology for gymnasiums throughout 1918, earning money by giving lessons. She studied psychoanalysis. She apparently remained an atheist, but she felt with her whole soul how immovably on the fiery roses the living altar of creation smoked. Obviously, gymnasium means something different than it does today. She managed to pay her dues to the poetical philosophy of Giordano Bruno and of Chekhov, and even at one time considered herself an Eastern Catholic. She changed faiths greedily, perhaps more often than her dresses. There were no dresses. She did not pay all that much attention to them anyway. And in addition, at the beginning, she considered herself a socialist and that the blood of revolt and civil war was inevitable, but she could not reconcile herself to terror. Democracy, but not atrocities. Let hands be steeped in blood, but not in mud. The end of 1918, she had to leave school. And did the school exist any longer anyway? With great difficulty, she managed to make her way to her parents, where the food situation was better. She arrived in Chekhov, an institute of people's education for adults and for young people had already been created there. Anna became no more and no less than an acting professor of logic, philosophy, and psychology. She was popular with the students. During this period, the whites were living out their last days in Chekhov. A 45-year-old general tried to persuade her to flee with him. General, call off the show. Escape before you are arrested. In those days, at a party for teachers, among themselves, a gymnasium teacher proposed a toast to the Great Red Army. Anna rejected the toast, not for anything. Knowing her leftist views, her friend's eyes popped out, because, notwithstanding the eternal stars, there will be more and more executions, she prophesied. Wow. I just can't imagine. I can, but I can't. She had that feeling that all the best people were perishing in this war, and only the opportunists were surviving. She already had a presentiment that her great moment was approaching, but she still did not know what it would be. Several days later, the Reds entered Chekhov, and a little later, a meeting of the city intelligentsia was assembled. The chief of the special section of the Fifth Army, Losev, came out on the stage and in a menacing tone, not far from cursing, began to abuse the rotten intelligentsia. What? Sitting on the fence were you? Waiting for me to invite you? Why didn't you come on your own? Getting wilder and wilder, he pulled his revolver out of its holster and brandishing it, screamed, "Your whole culture is rotten. We are going to destroy it and build a new one. And if any of you interfere, we will eliminate you." And after that he proposed, "Who wants to speak?" Wow. Can you imagine? The hall was silent as a grave. There was not one single bit of applause, and no hand was lifted. The hall was silent because it was frightened, but the fright was not yet rehearsed, and people did not know that it was compulsory for them to applaud. In all probability, Losev did not think that anyone would rise up to speak, but Anna stood up. You, he said rudely. Well, climb up here, climb up. And she walked the length of the hall and mounted the stage. Imagine the kind of courage that takes. A big woman with a big face, even with rosy cheeks. This 25-year-old woman was the generous Russian type. She got only an eighth of a pound of bread, but her father had a good garden. Thick auburn braids reached to her knees, but as an active professor, she could not go around with them like that and had them twisted on top of her head, giving herself a second head, and she replied resoundingly, "We have heard out your ignorant speech. You summoned us here, but it was not announced that it was to bury the great culture of Russia. We came here expecting to see a culture bearer and found a gravedigger. You would have done better simply to curse us out than to say what you did today. And so are we supposed to understand that you speak in the name of Soviet power? Wow. What a courageous thing to say." Of course, she couldn't have known how bad it was going to get, but it seems like she did have a feeling. Yes, the already taken aback Losov nonetheless affirmed proudly, "Well, if the Soviet government is going to have such bandits as you as its representatives, it will fall apart." Anna had finished, and the whole hall applauded ringingly. Being all together, they were not yet afraid, and the evening came to an end on that note. Losov found nothing else to say. People came up to Anna, pressed her hand in the thick of the crowd, and whispered, "You are done for. They are going to arrest you right away. But thank you. We are proud of you, but you are done for. What have you done?" At home, the Chekists were waiting for her. "Comrade teacher, how poorly you live. A desk, 2 chairs, and a cot. There's nothing to search. We have never arrested someone like you before. And your father is a worker. How is it that being so poor you could go over to the side of the bourgeoisie?" The Cheka had not yet got itself organized, and they brought Anna to a room in the chancellery of the special branch, where the White Guard Colonel Baron Bildering was already under arrest. Anna witnessed his interrogation and his execution, and later on she went and told his widow, "He died honorably. Be proud." They took her for questioning to the room where Losov was living and working. When she entered, he was sitting on a stripped bed in his field breeches and an unbuttoned shirt, scratching his chest. And I immediately demanded of the guard, "Take me out of here." Losov growled, "All right, I'll wash up and put on those kid gloves in which people make the revolution." For 1 week she awaited her death sentence in a state of ecstasy. Skripnikova now recalls this as the brightest week of her life. If these words are to be understood in their precise meaning, we can believe them completely. This is the kind of ecstasy which descends upon the soul as a reward. As a reward, when you have cast aside all hopes for impossible salvation and have steadfastly given yourself over to a great deed. Love of life destroys this ecstasy. She did not yet know that the city intellectuals had delivered a petition asking that she be pardoned. At the end of the 20s, this would not have been any help, and in the beginning of the 30s, no one would have been willing to sign. Losov began to take a conciliatory line in interrogating her. "In all the cities I've captured, I've never met anyone as mad as you. The city is in a state of siege, and all power here is in my hands, and you called me a gravedigger of Russian culture. Well, all right, we both lost our tempers. Take back bandit and hooligan. No, I still think the same about you. They keep coming to me from morning to night to ask for you. In the name of the honeymoon of Soviet power, I'm going to have to let you out. They let her out, not because they considered her speech harmless, but because she was a worker's daughter. They would not have forgiven a doctor's daughter that. This is how Skripnikova began her journey through the prisons. In 1922, she was held in Krasnodar, Chekhov, confined there for 8 months for acquaintance with a suspicious individual. There was an epidemic typhus and great congestion in that prison. They gave her bread ration amounting to somewhat less than 2 ounces per day, made from additives too. In her presence, a child died in the arms of the woman sitting next to her, and Anna took an oath never to have a child sit under such socialism as this, never to let herself be tempted by motherhood. She kept this oath. She lived out her life without a family, and her fate, her unwillingness to compromise, provided her more than once with the chance to return to prison. They began what was supposed to be a peaceful life, then began. In 1923, Skripnikova went to enter the Institute of Psychology at Moscow State University. In filling out the security questionnaire, she wrote, "Not a Marxist." Out of kindness of heart, her interviewers advised her, "Are you crazy? Who writes answers like that? State that you're a Marxist and think whatever you please. But I have no wish to deceive the Soviet government. I have simply never read Marx." Well, all the more so in that case. No, when I get around to studying Marxism, and if I accept it. And for the time being, she took a job teaching in a school for defectives. In 1925, the husband of her close friend and a socialist revolutionary fled to escape arrest. In order to force him to return, the GPU seized hostages in the midst of the new economic policy. Hostages? His wife and her friend, that is, Anna. She was just exactly the same round-faced, big-built woman with tresses that reached down to her knees when she entered her cell in the Lubyanka. This is where, the interrogator assured her, all those flourishes of the Russian intelligentsia are out of date. Just look after yourself. This time she was imprisoned about a month. In 1927, for participating in a musical society of teachers and workers, doomed to be destroyed as a possible nest of free thinking, Anna was arrested for what was by then the 4th time. She got 5 years and served them out on Solovki and the Bilamore Canal. Wow. From 1932 on, they did not touch her again for a long time. Yes, and evidently she lived more carefully. Beginning with 1948, however, they began to fire her from jobs. In 1952, the Institute of Psychology returned her to her already accepted dissertation, The Psychological Conception of Dubralov, on the grounds of her having received in 1927 a sentence based on Article 58. In this difficult time, she was already in her 4th year of unemployment. A hand reached out to help her from State Security. Lisov, a representative of the Central State Security apparatus. Well, now here's Lisov again. Was he alive? How little had changed even in the letters, just that he did not want to stick up his head openly, like an elk lost, but sniffled and darted like a fox. Lisa, who had arrived in Vladikavkaz, proposed that she collaborate, in return for which work would be arranged for her and she would be allowed to defend her dissertation. Proudly she turned him down. Then they nimbly cooked up a charge that 11 years earlier, in 1941, she had said that we had been poorly prepared for the war, and had we been well prepared? that the German armies were deployed along our borders and that we were sending them grain. And were we not? And on this occasion she got 10 years and landed in the special camps, first Dubrovnik in Mordivinia, and then Kamishleg at the Soslava station in Kamerva province. Sensing that impenetrable wall in front of her, she thought up the idea of writing petitions not just anywhere, but to the United Nations. During Stalin's lifetime, she sent off 3 of them. This was not just some sort of trick, not at all. She actually genuinely eased her eternally bubbling soul by speaking her mind's eye with the UN. She actually, during these decades of cannibalism, had seen no other light in the world. In these petitions, she lashed out at the savage tyranny in the Soviet Union and asked the UN to intervene with the Soviet government, and replied and request it either to reinvestigate her case or else to have her executed. She could no longer go on living under this terror. She would address the envelopes personally to one or another of the Soviet leaders, and inside lay the request that had been sent to the UN. In Dubrovnik, she was summoned by a clique of the infuriated bosses. How dare you write to the UN? Skripnikova stood there, as always, erect, large, majestic. Neither in the criminal code, nor in the code of criminal procedure, nor in the Constitution itself is it forbidden, and you ought not to have opened envelopes addressed personally to members of the government. In 1956, an unloading commission of the Supreme Soviet was functioning in their camp. The only task of this commission was to free as many Zeks as possible, as quickly as possible. There was a certain modest procedure which consisted in having the Zek say several apologetic words and stand there a bit with drooping head. But no, Anna Skripnikova was not that kind. Her own personal release was nothing in comparison with common justice. How could she accept forgiveness if she was innocent? And she declared to the commission, quote, "Don't be so overjoyed. All accessories to Stalin's terror are going to have to answer to the people sooner or later. I do not know whom you were personally under Stalin, citizen colonel, but if you were an accessory to its terror, then you too are going to be sitting on the defendant's bench." Unquote. The members of the commission gulped in fury, shouted that she was insulting the Supreme Soviet in their persons, and that this would cost her plenty, and that she would just go on serving time from one toll of the gong to the next. And in actual fact, because of her vain faith in justice, she had to serve 3 extra years. From Kamishleg, she sometimes continued to write to the UN. In 7 years up to 1959, she wrote a total of 80 petitions to various institutions. In 1958, because of these letters, she was sent for 1 year to the Vladimir political prison, and there they had one rule. Once in every 10 days, they would accept a petition directly to an authority. During half a year, she sent 18 declarations from there to different institutions, including 12 to the UN, and she got her way in the end. She got not execution, but a re-examination of her case, the cases of 1927 and 1952. She said to the interrogator, "Well, what do you want?" A petition to the UN is the only means of knocking a hole in the wall of Soviet bureaucracy and compelling the death demons, at least, to hear something. The interrogator jumped up and beat his breast. All the accessories to the Stalinist terror, as you, for some reason, call the personality cult, will answer to the people? And what am I to answer for? What other policy could I execute at that time? Yes, I believed Stalin without any doubts, and I did not know anything. But Skripnikova kept hitting away at him. No, you can't get away with that. One has to bear the responsibility for every crime. What is supposed to answer for the deaths of millions? Who is supposed to answer for the deaths of millions of innocents? For the flower of the nation and the flower of the party, the dead Stalin, the executed Beria, while you pursue your political career? Her own blood pressure at this moment was rising to the danger point. She shut her eyes and everything whirled and flamed. And they would still have detained her, but in 1959 a case of this sort was a real curiosity. And in the years that followed, and she is alive right now, her life has been filled with solicitations on behalf of those still imprisoned or in exile, and those whose sentences still remain on the records, those whom she met in camps in recent years. She got several of them released. She got others rehabilitated, and she has also undertaken the defense of those who live in her own city. The city authorities are afraid of her pen and the envelopes she sends off to Moscow, and in some degree they make concessions to her. And if everyone were even 1/4 as implacable as Anna Skripnikova, the history of Russia would be different. Wow, what a great story. Geez, that went so fast. Did that feel like 20 minutes? That went so fast. Wow, what a great story. Okay, I have to stop. I can't record anymore. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.